you know, we all probably think of Al Gore as somebody who's a politician, somebody from Washington, but over the past decade, he has really transformed himself into a business person. Of course, we all know what he's done when it comes to the conversation about sustainability. He is the author of The Inconvenient Truth, The Assault on Reason. You know all this. What you may not know beyond that is that he founded a group called the Generation Investment Management Group, which manages $12 billion for its clients. And the goal is to look for sustainable investments. I will let you speak to this.
Okay.
But, you know, one of the conversations we've been having all day about playing for the long term are who are the constituents and how we should be thinking about the long term and what that really means. And we've had Coca-Cola here and IBM here, and we've had BlackRock here. But when you think about sort of making investments for the long term, and you've now done it and done it successfully, what were the criteria? What was the thinking around what this business is all about? Because I don't think people really know that you're even doing this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Andrew, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be here. And may I mention that a couple of my colleagues from Generation Investment Management are here, Peter Knight and Renee Beaumont. And the success that we've had, I'm looking for wood to knock on. My colleagues have made me superstitious about talking about past success. But it's been the result of a great team. David Blood and I co-founded Generation 12 years ago now, and we've been managing assets for other people's assets for a little over 10 years. I think that there are two separate but closely related topics. One is short-termism, which we don't like, and the other is the full integration of sustainability values into the investment process. These topics are closely related because unlocking the value that you can find by integrating sustainability values is optimized over a longer period of investing. But let's start with the short-termism. Right. 40 years ago, the average holding period for stocks was about 6 or 7 years. As recently as 1974, it was that high. Now, depending on how you do the calculations, the holding period is under 29 days. If you take exchange-traded funds and algorithmic trades out of it, it's around 17 weeks. But that's just a remarkable change. Here's the really important thing about it, Andrew. It clashes, this high turnover and the short-term horizons that are now so endemic in most investing, clash with the organic process by which real businesses build up their value. And, you know, building a business, you got to hire your team and do a plan and find your markets and supplies and all of that. That takes time. And about 75% of the real value of an average company builds up over a business cycle and a half, 5 to 7 years, say. Now, if you're getting in and out of the market in 29 days, then at some point the clash between what the real process is you're investing in and how you're turning over your money leads to mistakes. Right. And there's ample research that shows the longer-term investors get better returns. But before I turn to the sustainability issues, let's talk about this one.
Well, the thing I want to understand is your firm, people don't necessarily even know this. Over the past decade, I'm reading now from The Atlantic, you have made more money in the Darwinian competition of international finance by applying an environmentally conscious model of sustainable investing than of most fund managers who are guided by a straight-ahead pursuit of profit. How much have you outperformed, and what is in this portfolio?
Well, everything that's in our, first of all, it's a concentrated portfolio, long-term investing, global equities. And everything that goes into our portfolio gets there after a lengthy process. We will have many visits typically and many more conversations and in-depth research. but we apply a sustainability lens, meaning not just environmental sustainability, but how does this business treat its employees? What is their health? What are the ethics in the executive suites? How do they deal with the communities where they're located and the communities reached by their supply chains? All of that is relevant. We often use a metaphor, if you will allow me to use it briefly. The electromagnetic spectrum, which we all learned about as kids, goes from very short wavelengths to very long wavelengths, gamma rays to radio waves. And the portion of it that's made up of visible light is actually 1/10 of 1% of the full spectrum. I had the unusual experience of spending 8 years in the White House and starting every single day with at least an hour being briefed by the intelligence communities, which, as you may have read, collect from the entire spectrum all the information that's relevant and some more. And the picture they compiled was far more complete. Now, by analogy, there is a very narrow slice of the value spectrum that's represented in quarterly reports and filings on the Bloomberg screens, et cetera. And in order to harvest the information that lies elsewhere in that spectrum, the environment, communities, employees, et cetera, you have to organize yourself and build a team with routines and vocabularies and approaches that will integrate all of that information into a more complete picture. And again, that's easier to do if you have the luxury of taking a little more patience. We compensate ourselves on a 3-year cycle, for example, to try on the bonuses, the lion's share of it, in order to relieve the short-term pressures that many compensation and incentive schemes actually push into the market. You know, BNA, one of the great market research organizations, a few years ago did a classic study. One of the questions they asked CEOs and CFOs was a hypothetical. Here's an investment you can make that will build the long-term value of your company significantly. It's good in every respect, except if you make this investment, you will slightly miss next quarter's earnings projection. Given those facts, will you make the investment? 80% said no. Now, that is functionally insane. And when you take that insanity and impose it on a wide swath of the market, what you get is suboptimal decision making that leaves a lot of value on the table. Larry Fink, who was here earlier, I didn't have a chance to hear him, but he's pointed out that the average tenure of CEOs has gone way down, and in a manufacturing business, if that CEO needs to make an investment for a large new factory, well, there's not going to be positive cash flow for more than the tenure of the CEO.
Is your sense, though, that your investment thesis and the approach is an effort to make just simply more money? Or do you think that everybody here should be following this as a way to press or pressure, if you will, companies to behave in a different way? What is the goal?
Well, we believe, my colleagues and I at Generation believe that it is best practice and that it will soon be recognized as best practice. There is this plague of short-termism now that is partly cultural. It's sustained by these weird incentive and compensation structures, and there are a lot of other forces pushing toward short-termism in politics as well as in business and our culture as well. But we believe that the research, not just our record, we're very proud of what we've accomplished for our clients in 10 years, but the research is pretty significant now. Massive study by the University of Oxford in partnership with Arabesque, one of the investment outfits, took 190 different studies and some news reports and showed pretty conclusively, along with other studies, that those investors and firms that fully integrate sustainability outperform those that do not. So our goal is to make the most for our clients that we can, and in so doing, prove the business case that sustainability values should be completely integrated in the investment process. Because we can say that until we're blue in the face, but by proving it in practice and referring to the research that's mounting up and encouraging others to do it, that's really a much more persuasive way to make the case.
Question about investing in green energy and energy writ large. I want to read something that Bill Gates just said recently. He says, "There is no fortune to be made. Even if you have a new energy source that costs the same as today's and emits no CO2, it will be uncertain compared with what's tried and true. Without a substantial carbon tax, there's no incentive for innovators or plant buyers to switch." And he mentions that since World War II, U.S. government R&D has defined the state of the art in almost every area. The private sector is in general inept.
Well,
what do you think of that?
I certainly agree with Bill Gates that we need to put a price on carbon in markets. It's crazy that we don't. We use the atmosphere of the planet, which is very thin, by the way. It's not a vast space. It's a very thin shell around the planet. We put 110 million tons of global warming pollution into it every day as if it's an open sewer. It traps the heat and unleashes all the consequences that are associated now with global warming and the extreme weather events and the sea level rise. And don't get me started on that.
I plan to in a second.
The cumulative amount of man-made global warming pollution that's in the atmosphere now traps as much extra heat energy every day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours. And that's what's raising the heat of the oceans and the atmosphere, melting the ice, and all the rest. So we should put a price on this to internalize it in market decision-making. But on renewable energy, which is your real question, you know, a lot of people are making the same mistake in looking at, say, solar photovoltaic panels as they did 20, 30 years ago when they looked at cell phones. AT&T, when the first big clunky cell phones came out, commissioned a study by McKinsey. How many of these will we be able to sell by the year 2000? McKinsey did its work and came back with the answer, 900,000. And when 2000 came around, they did sell 900,000 in the first 3 days. And it was 120x the prediction at the end of the year. Now there are 6.8 billion cell phones. So solar PV panels are coming down in cost on a very steep trajectory. Wind is as well. Wind is now the cheapest electricity of any source in both the U.S. and the U.K. Solar is in an increasing number of regions and nations in the world cheaper than electricity from coal. And the more we use, the cheaper it gets. The more coal we use, the more expensive it gets. This is the biggest revolution in business in all of history. We are going to see the decarbonizing of the economy. And this exponential cost down curve is continuing. Bangladesh is now installing 2 rooftop systems per minute on average, night and day. We're seeing in West Africa, East Africa, now it's beginning in South Africa, South Asia. We're seeing an explosion of renewable energy investment. And for the last several years, since 2010 actually, the investments in renewable energy for new generating capacity have been significantly larger than investments in fossil fuels. And the delta keeps growing. Here, this year in the U.S., 3/4 of all the new electricity generating capacity this year is solar and wind. Coal companies are going bankrupt every week. Their assets are stranded. We have $21 trillion of potentially stranded subprime carbon assets. And the 2 things that people overlook on renewables are, number one, what I mentioned, the cost down curve. But the second is trickier to integrate into the calculations. Zero marginal cost. Because once the solar facility is built, the marginal cost of the next kilowatt hour is zero, basically. Whereas with fossil fuels, the fuel cost, which is unpredictable, very heavy, becoming unsustainable, this transition is accelerating.
Right. Let me ask you about this, and I've heard this now from all sorts of people in the business community who point to articles over the past year or two about global warming, and not to suggest that they're denying it's happening, but they consistently, as you have lived through for so long, raise questions. I'll read a headline. This was in the New York Times. A NASA study, this is just from Friday, found that Antarctica has been adding more ice than it's been losing, challenging other research, including that of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There are business people who look at that and say, I don't know if I should be investing in all of the things that you're talking about. What do you tell them?
Well, I was with George Shultz recently, who said, if you take that view, watch out, you're going to be mugged by reality. And it's happening right now. That particular study is an extreme outlier. All of the other studies disagree with that. Look, I was in Miami a few weeks ago, and on a sunny day, fish from the ocean were swimming in some of the streets. The melting ice has now raised sea level to the point that quite a number of coastal cities are already experiencing this. The largest naval base in the world in Norfolk is going to have to be completely relocated because of this phenomenon. It's not really productive to get into the weeds on why, you know, there are always going to be some disagreements or disputes. I mean, some have used the example, if you have the privilege of consulting the 100 leading heart doctors in the world, and 99 of them say to you, oh my gosh, you got to change your diet and take this statin and do this and do that, but you find one who says, I'm just not sure yet, let's wait for more evidence. Would you go with the one? I mean, we probably both have some friends who would go with the one, but most people would say, okay, I get it. The evidence is so overwhelming now. It's really, we're the only country in the world where one of the two major political movements rejects the science. And, you know, it's like the old saying, if you see a turtle on a fence post, you can be pretty sure it didn't get there by itself. There have been billions of dollars spent following the model of the tobacco industry after the Surgeon General's report to create false doubt. I mean, it's all documented, The Merchants of Doubt by Naomi Oreskes and her co-author, and I mean, it's almost a cliche now to point out how overwhelming the evidence is. But people now see it and feel it for themselves. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. A few years ago, we had one of many once-in-a-thousand-year rainfalls. Thousands of my neighbors lost their homes and businesses, had no flood insurance because it had never, ever flooded in the areas affected. And this city, with Superstorm Sandy, and you know the list of examples, people are actually experiencing this in their own lives now. But the point here is, how should investors react to this collision between a very carbon-intensive global economy and a surprisingly fragile ecosphere on which our prosperity and flourishing depends? Virtually the entire scientific community, every national academy, every professional scientific society, etc., say, oh my gosh, we've got to do something about this urgently. Now, the good news is we are beginning to take action. China's moving very swiftly, and the agreement between President Xi and President Obama 1 year ago really unlocked the formula for success in Paris starting November 30th.
You're more optimistic than others. There are some people who are actually a lot more pessimistic than you on that.
Yes, there are, and I do not mean to say that at the Paris meeting the world will reach an agreement that definitively solves the problem. However, you will see a very clear set of signals on the direction of travel. You will see significant commitments that will add to the momentum that business is already adding to in decarbonizing. And by the way, you know, we have a society with 85% of the energy coming from carbon that has been priced at a seemingly very low level because we don't take into account all the externalities. But because of that, we've had 150 years of routine choices in favor of inefficiency, betting that the marginal cost of just burning more energy will make up for it. But that means there's low-hanging fruit everywhere. And with the new digital tools that are available and the network, the Internet of Things, we are now seeing a new surge of efficiency, a new product design, along with the push toward renewable energy sources that is really having a major impact on demand. And the more of these renewable sources come online, the more the carbon burners are sitting idle, so their average utility goes down, and it is a vicious cycle for them, a virtuous cycle for the renewable decarbonization push.
I'm going to open up for questions very soon so everyone can get a chance to ask a question. You mentioned cigarettes before, and the false information that the cigarette companies have put out. I don't know if you want to weigh in on this or not. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and others have suggested there should be an investigation into ExxonMobil, suggesting effectively that they should be prosecuted under the RICO statute for lying about climate science. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think certainly there should be an investigation. There already is an investigation, and I forget the exact number, around 30 states are already.
40.
40 states now. So, of course, this was a very cynical decision, and it was exactly what the tobacco industry did. It was an immoral decision. Now, whether the facts support an indictment under this law or that law, that's not for me to decide. But should there be an investigation? Of course. The investigations by Inside Climate News, Pulitzer Prize winning online journal, and the LA Times separately, both show very clearly that the company's scientists and board knew exactly what the climate science said as early as 1980. And for a time, they proceeded in a kind of a proper way. What can we do to react to this? But then they said, nah, we're going to hide this. We're going to give lots of money to charlatans who will go out and fool the public into believing this isn't real. And the playbook came from the tobacco industry. You know, they hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and put them in front of cameras with a script to say, hi, I'm a doctor, and there's absolutely no problem with smoking cigarettes. And, you know, a lot of people died as a result. So, yes, this clearly should be investigated. My favorite quote from the current CEO, I think I can get this verbatim. He was pressed at a shareholder meeting.
This is Rex Tillerson.
Yes. He was not the one in charge when this unethical decision was made, but the policy's been mostly continued. He said, what good is it to save the planet if people suffer? And I don't actually know where to begin in responding to that.
We just have a couple of minutes, so let me just ask you two things real quick. I mentioned Hillary and I mentioned Bernie Sanders. I don't know if you want to endorse a candidate while you're on the stage, but I'll give you the chance.
I'll pass for now.
You'll speak to this, though. What do you think of this?
Is it this November? Oh, no.
Today's election day, but you got a whole other year to go.
From now.
But,
I'm sorry.
You know, we're going to have Carl Icahn is going to be coming on stage in just a little bit. And I don't know if you know, but Donald Trump has suggested that Carl Icahn should be his Treasury Secretary.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have views on that, or just more broadly speaking, as the both political and capitalist that you are, how you see all this playing out.
What, the election?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Then I'm going to go to the audience. Thank you. We have some questions. We'll go all the way in the back there. Gabe.
Mr. Vice President, it's Gabe Sherman, New York Magazine. Just want to touch on what Andrew was saying. You know, given the issues that you've been fighting for, and you talked about on stage, over the summer, there were some reports that you were potentially considering another run for the White House. A, was that true? And if so, are you still thinking about it?
I've given the same answer since January 21st, 2001. I'm a recovering politician. And the longer I go without a relapse, the less likely one becomes.
I think we have a question right here. Yep.
So one of the biggest challenges for renewable energy is ensuring that the grid has power 24/7, enough to meet demand. So, what role do you see nuclear, natural gas, or just battery technology playing in that?
Well, batteries are now experiencing the beginnings of the same cost-down curve. Tesla's Powerwall announcement with its gigafactory under construction in Nevada is only one of many, many investment decisions that are playing out around the world. And lithium-ion is in the lead position now, first mover advantage. There are other chemistries, lithium-air, others. But the main thing to remember is that batteries are coming down in cost now very, very quickly. Now, on your question about nuclear, I was in the Congress, House, and Senate. I used to represent Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where my constituents were immune to the effects of radiation, and thus I was as well. And I was very enthusiastically supportive of nuclear power. It's been disappointing over the years, and it is now wildly it's way too expensive. If you're the CEO of an electric utility here in the United States, and you say, I want to build a new nuclear power plant, what about it, everybody? Two of the questions you might want to ask are, number one, how much will it cost? There is not a single engineering consulting firm in the Western world that will give you an answer to that question. You can't get the answer. The cost has been going up dramatically, 15% a year for quite a long time. Second question you might want to ask is, how long before I'll be able to sell some of the electricity generated by this plant? Once again, there is no one who can answer that question. It's extremely expensive. It turned out that the project of scaling up the small submarine-based reactors to 1,000 gigawatt scale turned out to be more complex, more expensive, more fragile than was predicted at the time. There will be a continuing role for nuclear power. I'm not opposed to it. I think we can solve the nuclear waste problem and the terrorism problem. We have to keep a close eye on the nuclear proliferation problem. For the 8 years I was vice president, every single weapons proliferation problem we had was connected to a reactor program. But assuming that we solve all that, we've still got the cost problem. I'm hopeful that research and development will yield new designs that are cheaper, even affordable, and passively safe. I went back to Oak Ridge recently and saw 100 different designs at various stages of the process. None of them are as close as 15 years to being really rolled out, and all of them face uncertainties.
A couple more questions right here. By the way, are you long Tesla? I know you mentioned, do you like Tesla as a company?
Generation has not invested in Tesla. I personally actually did make an investment in Tesla quite some time ago.
So that was actually a good investment then. Would you buy it now?
I'm not going to give investment advice on specific stocks.
But I'd try.
I hope it is.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for coming today. My question involves thoughts about how to manage the existing content of carbon dioxide or quantity that's in the atmosphere currently. You mentioned technologies that will keep or minimize the further contribution to the problem, but what about removal?
Removal, yeah. Well, the most effective device that we have at present for doing that is called a tree. And when you take that technology to scale, it's called a forest. and protecting forests around the world. Also, it's important to focus on the role of soils. There's 3.5 times as much carbon in the topsoils of the world as in all the trees and vegetation. So those two systems really need care and protection. And that's a part of what's unfolding in Paris, more with the forests than soils, but soils will take their turn. What you're really asking is whether there's some technology that we could use to suck this excess CO2 out of the atmosphere. Along with Jim Hansen, I'd agreed to be on the jury to give out a big prize for somebody that comes up with such an idea. Nobody's claimed the money. There is a lot of work underway. I'm hopeful that there will be some research, but the volumes are so enormous that the practicalities of it are daunting, to say the least. What we really need to do is to stop spewing 110 million tons every day into the air. And now we have the tools available to us to make electricity without generating CO2, to make our buildings and vehicles way more efficient, to make farming and forestry way more efficient and sequester more carbon in natural systems.
Why don't we try to sneak one final question in? I did see a hand in the middle. We'll take it and we'll then say thank you.
Hello. I want to thank you for coming to speak with us today. And you talked about ExxonMobil, and what came to my mind was a recent column written by Jay Ambrose. And he was claiming that even the idea of investigating ExxonMobil would be a violation of our First Amendment rights. And I was just kind of wondering what you would have to say to respond to that.
I don't understand why. I don't know the article you're referring to, but if not every form of speech is automatically protected. If speech is used in the commission of a crime, then that doesn't get you off the hook if the crime has been committed.
Exactly. He was quoting the philosophy of John Stuart Mill, and just kind of saying that speech is all right, but John Stuart Mill also is known for the harm principle, which is pretty much what you just...
Let me put a different spin on this. I know you need to end this, but here's another way to think about this. The discussions of this particular matter have focused on the RICO statute and laws against fraud. Just to bring it back to investing, you know, most companies are careful not to make false and misleading statements about issues or facts that have a material bearing on the value or prospective value of their stocks. If a company is communicating widely, including with the investor public, and makes a knowingly false and misleading statement that can have a material impact on the way potential investors and investors analyze the value of that stock, that's frowned upon, to say the least. I think as the world faces the climate crisis and begins to seize the magnificent opportunities to solve it and build a better, more prosperous, sustainable future, there is hardly any fact more material to the future of carbon-intensive companies than whether or not the scientific community is correct, that we're going to have to stop burning carbon fuels as quickly as possible. So giving money to people who go out to the public and dispute the best available evidence as analyzed by the best scientific minds in the world, purely to extend the period during which they can use the atmosphere as a sewer, is material to what they're saying to the investor public about the future value of their stock. It's just a question I pose. I'm not a lawyer, but that troubles me.
Al Gore, everybody, it's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions.